Hello, this is Tim with Red Mountain Air Conditioning, and we're looking at a carrier furnace in an attic. We are in Santan Valley, Arizona, and then we have a carrier cooling coil, and we have flexible double wall flue pipe right here, flexible double wall flue pipe. Now, this is an older system, and we are getting ready to, actually I'm here to provide a quote to replace this, but I wanted to point out a couple things. Number one, that end of the furnace has dog chain attached to a bracket that's screwed into the, from this angle, looks like the top of the furnace because the furnace is laying down. So that bracket is screwed into the side of the furnace, but the top. And then they have another one on this end, which is right. Let me see if I can get a better view. There's the dog chain, and it attaches to a bracket that's screwed in to the end of the furnace at the top. Now, if you look, that's not a good way to hang a furnace because that furnace cabinetry isn't that strong. So the door of the furnace, you see how, I'll try to zoom in here. There's a bigger gap from the furnace and the door. The door's hanging kind of funny. And then over here, it's a little different. The gap between the furnace, the side of the cover and the side of the furnace should be pretty flush, and they're not. And over here, it's even worse. But that's because that furnace is kind of sagging a little bit. You really need to build a cradle that the furnace sits on top of, a cradle under here that the furnace would sit on, and that cradle's got to have support from this end all the way to that end, not just on the ends. And we go all the way to the end of the coil section. So the hanger rigging really does suck here. I shouldn't use that language, but it really is a poor job. And it's made it so every time they take the door off the coil and put the door back on, they can't get the door on right. So you got all this tape on the coil. Now, there's a bigger mistake here. Because again, when you hang stuff improperly and you take the door off of it, the remaining cabinet will drop and sag a little or whatever, and now you can't get the door back on right. So you've got all this tape over and over. People have tried to seal that coil up with tape. And a big part of it wasn't hung right. But here's the big thing. You see how the coil, the top of the coil is here, and you got about 4 inches to the top of the furnace. And on a carrier, because that's not an A coil inside of it, it's an N coil. You have to, if you have left to right airflow, you have to mount that so it's flush on the top, flat on top, and then staggered on the bottom. And this one's flat on the bottom and staggered on the top. You can see there's about 4 inches. So that means a big part of that coil section isn't getting good airflow across it. A third of that coil section is not getting decent airflow across it because it's an N. Now, if it was an A coil, it wouldn't be a problem. But inside of there, it's an N shape. And that's a big problem. That's cost efficiency and capacity and energy dollars for the life of this system. And it's not particularly old. Now, the last thing I'll note, the flue goes downhill. And the flue has to go uphill. See, the flue gas comes out of the unit and it has to go downhill for a bit before it goes back uphill. Now, is that an egregious situation? It probably on this one isn't affecting it a whole lot, but it's against code. If you own this house and you're trying to sell it, somebody did this work, you'd end up doing the repairs at your cost. If they would have used a shorter piece of flexible flue, they would have been able to make that all nice and gradually uphill, or just slid this rigid piece up a little bit. So we got 3 problems here that we can look at visually. Number one, the brackets The hanger rigging is inferior. It's just not good enough. And that's causing all of these, the need for all of this repeated visits to tape that coil section up. Number two, the unit's supposed to be flat on top, not flat on bottom. That's a big cost and efficiency and capacity. And it can kill a compressor or lead to an early compressor failure. And then we've got the flue going downhill for part of it. And I don't know if my camera showed. There's a pretty good angle. You can see the flue comes out of the unit, then goes downhill, and then goes back uphill, and eventually exits the roof there. So 3 big problems, and it's all has nothing to do with the manufacturer. It's everything to do with the company or the guys that installed it. Now, if I, as an estimator, send guys out without proper instruction or without the proper hanger rigging, they cannot do good work in this position. But so a lot of it isn't necessarily the installers. A lot of it is the estimator or the project coordinator or whoever's running the job.